death of Michael Jackson, the world has lost the last of the great entertainers. And Michael Jackson's legacy is really multi-generational. It's from 1969 to 2009. I remember when the Jackson 5 first exploded on the scene. Our local school district had just integrated in 1969. And this was some 15 years after Brown versus the Board of Education. Some 3 years before, in 1966, my father had sent my older siblings, my brother Greg, sister Donna, brother Bruce, up to the local high school, junior high school, to integrate it. But the school district itself wasn't integrated. They were just the first African Americans to enroll at the school during desegregation. A year later, other family members enrolled at the school, but the school district wasn't desegregated. It wasn't until the Federal District Court in New Orleans ruled in 1969 that all Mississippi school districts had to desegregate immediately. And I say immediately, we have to take with a grain of salt because, again, this is some 15 years after Brown versus the Board of Education. But we weren't able to go to school that August because Hurricane Camille had hit the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And my small town of Pass Christian was literally wiped off the map. And Katrina was just a repeat of that a few years ago, what my hometown had suffered again with Katrina. The school district didn't open up until October of 1969, and there was some easiness bringing these elementary kids together for the first time, you know, black and white kids in Mississippi. And there were some tensions, there were some fights, you know, that broke out. I was involved in some of them. But in December of '69, right around the Christmas holidays, this new group hit the scene. And after their first 3 records had gone to #1, they came on the Ed Sullivan Show. And after hearing them and seeing their album covers, America got a chance to first see them perform. And that transformed my local elementary school. Immediately, the kids in elementary school, there was all these groups of 5 emerging to emulate the Jackson 5 during our school talent shows. And I think back on it now, some 40 years later, that really helped ease integration in our elementary school because all the kids, black and white, had formed their groups to emulate the Jackson 5 when we would have our weekly talent shows at the elementary school. I think that they also helped transform America because in 1968, Martin Luther King had been assassinated. There were major urban riots in a lot of the major cities. And it was basically just distrust in the African American community about the direction the country was going in, about the sincerity of how the federal government and state governments, in the North and South, dealt with African Americans. And we're really at a low moment. There were a lot of negative reports coming out about the disproportionate number of female-headed households, the disproportionate number of African Americans in poverty, and there wasn't much positive to focus on with the assassination of Dr. King. And then a year later, in 1969, these 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana emerged on the scene. They allowed African Americans to transfer the focus on despair and negativity to a family unit that sort of challenged a lot of these studies that were coming out that basically talked about, if you will, the decline of the black family in the United States. This wasn't so with the Jacksons coming out of Gary, Indiana, a stay-at-home mom, a father who worked at a steel mill, who was a part-time musician, and he had all these talented little boys. And so America glimpsed them, and it helped America change because America was able to not focus so much now on the 60s and all the trauma with the assassinations, with the urban riots from the 60s, and to a more hopeful attitude towards America, because we saw these 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana coming on the scene. And in his solo career, Michael did the same thing. His solo albums sold tremendously around the world. He broke barriers in the recording industry and renegotiated his royalty rights. He broke the color barrier on the video channels. MTV, other video channels sprung up in competition, and a lot of that had to do with Michael Jackson. His humanitarian contributions are unmatched in the entertainment industry, and I think that the world and the United States in particular, owe a great debt to Michael Jackson. And I think that he will long be remembered for the positive things that he contributed to the world and to the United States. In a long way, his legacy is about healing the world. Rest in peace, Michael Jackson.